Hello and welcome back to our video confirmation discussion starter. This is module 1.2 entitled Isaac Born to Sarah. Today we're going to examine Genesis chapter 18 verses 1 through 15 and also Genesis chapter 21 verses 1 through 7. Now you will find the references to those texts listed in the description below. I'd like you to watch this brief introduction and then read those texts and think about the questions I pose at the end. Now, last time we examined the creation accounts at the beginning of the first book of the Hebrew Bible, what we know as the Old Testament. This week, we still find ourselves in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Hebrew Bible, and we will be examining the saga of Abram and Sarai, later known as Abraham and Sarah, the patriarch, which is the father, and the matriarch, which is the mother of a few nations. In fact, Abram and Sarai serve as the parents of three major world faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those three faiths are known by scholars as the Abrahamic faiths. They are three faiths that share the same patriarch and matriarch, and they have different experiences of the same God. So in many respects, this biblical account from Genesis about Abraham and Sarah is the foundational account of the Abrahamic faiths, more so than, say, the creation accounts that we started with last week. In fact, biblical scholars date the saga of Abraham and Sarah to about 3,000 years before Christ. And they also date the creation accounts that we find at the beginning of the book of Genesis to be just 600 years before the birth of Christ. So today's text is very, very old. Last time we examined how the different creation accounts referenced different characteristics of God or different names of God. For instance, in the first creation account, that references El Shaddai, or God Almighty. It's in that priestly account where El Shaddai's spirit, his Ruach, basically resonates across this formless void and literally sings creation into being. While in the second account, you have a very different understanding of God. God is named as Yahweh, and God, as we talked about, is anthropomorphized. He's represented in human form. He's a God who, like we said last week, literally gets his hands dirty by making Adam out of dust and mud and then breathing his spirit into him. Here, in the saga of Abram and Sarah, the characteristic of God mentioned in the text, and the name of God, is the God El Elyon, God Most High. Now, pay attention and remember how God is portrayed in the first Genesis creation account as God Almighty, as El Shaddai, whose spirit sings creation into order, as opposed to the aspect of God portrayed in the second creation account as Yahweh, who is in human form and literally forms Adam out of the earth. Well, in the case of Abraham and Sarah, El Elyon, God Most High, is presented in the most ancient of ways as somewhat as a superhero. As you'll see when you read the text, he and his heavenly court are so human-like that they can visit with Abraham and Sarah during the afternoon, and Abraham and Sarah mistake them for strangers. Sarah even laughs at El Elyon at one point. So as I said, read those accounts and pay close attention to how God is portrayed in those accounts. And then I want you to think about these three questions. First is obvious. I want you to be able to talk about how God is portrayed. If you had to describe God, what would God be like? Second thing I'd like you to deal with is, does that description of God that you find here in Genesis, does it surprise you in any way? And then the third thing I want you to think about is, how do you normally conceive of God? So have fun, and we'll see you again when we gather for our discussion.